Welcome to this session about regulatory harmonization of social performance standards. What we have over the last years, and I would even say over the past months, we have seen an impressive acceleration of regulatory and of harmonization or standardization or taxonomy efforts in the area of responsible or sustainable finance. Our microfinance industry is not really in the center of all of this attention, which does focus the broader financial markets. So why are we concerned? And why do we have this session at the European Microfinance Group? I will take a couple of minutes just to frame this discussion and give you all an update on where we come from and where we are currently going as an industry. But maybe before that, I would love to take 2 minutes to introduce the panelists of this session. Yeah, let's start with that. And let's do ladies first. And we start with Ariane and then Marco.
Thank you, Jürgen. Yeah, my name is Ariane Schön. I'm working at Invest in Visions. Invest in Visions is a German-based company active in microfinance. So we have several microfinance funds, one public one. I will present that later on. Yeah, I work for the business development team in impact measurement. So I'm responsible for all the impact measurement activities of our funds. And in this context, also all implementing or trying to implement the new regulatory standards or requirements that came up. So I'm trying to see, together with my team or with 2 other persons, how we can implement and correspond to these regulatory requirements that now come up. So I'm looking forward to that session, and I'm handing over to Marco.
Thank you, Ariane, and thank you, Jürgen, for your introduction. I will just spend a few words about my background, just for you to get a better understanding of, what I will also talk about. I work for the University of Luxembourg, and I'm a research scientist. We have been mostly focusing on sustainable finance regulation, looking at many of the recent developments, particularly at European level. Of course, the reference is mostly to the taxonomy regulation, the sustainable finance disclosure regulation, and all the implementing rules which have been adopted over the last 2 years. And today's presentation will also look at some of these key aspects from regulatory/legislative perspective. Thank you, Jürgen, back to you.
Thank you, Aranya. Thank you, Marco. Sorry, let me just go here. As I said before, we are in a context where we see an incredible acceleration of discussions about taxonomy and about regulations, about harmonizations of concepts, which somehow happen and do not directly focus our microfinance industry, but yet we are very much concerned. And I would like to take just a couple of minutes of introduction to contextualize a little bit where our industry stands in this context. As all of us, I think, in this call know, the microfinance industry comes with, I would say, a 40-year-old promise of delivering financial and social results. And as such, this industry has worked for decades to demonstrate, on one hand, that it's financially sustainable, but also on the other hand, and that it is achieving its social promises. Social performance management, which was, I would say, started in the beginning individually by organizations, microfinance organizations or investors. Since 2005, with the creation of SPTF, has been coordinated. And as an industry, we have developed a self-regulatory approach to define what are we talking about, what are the concepts, to have a common language about social performance and social performance management. Which are the achievements of our industry that we can show? We have demonstrated the value of cooperation and coordination. That sounds very simple, but in reality, it's not. We all know we do work in competitive environments, and so it was not an obvious step to agree as an industry that we are better by cooperating and by coordinating. We don't lose anything by sharing our experiences. And that's what we practiced, I would say now really for 15 years, is learning that confidence among market participants, that on certain topics, we have an interest, a joint interest to work together. One of our big achievements, we need to say, is that we have created that language for our industry. There have been universal standards for now 2012, over 10 years, which became the language of our industry for demonstrating social performance and social performance management. We have not only developed a common language, but we have also, and that's really unique, developed an evaluation methodology tool that's implemented. Over 1,000 organizations have been using it. So there is a big experience in this industry on exactly that topic of creating common language, clarity, etc. What is new since 2021, and many of you have been involved in those topics, and I just wanted to give it as an update. Those standards, like every standard, need to be reviewed regularly to make sure that they remain in line with developments and with developments. This is a process that has been achieved in 2020-21 with updated universal standards, which will be launched early 2022. In those new standards, we have integrated the reviewed and retested client protection standards that have been fully integrated into the universal standards and to the SPTF CERISE work, and developed the client protection pathway. We have developed, and together with the European Microfinance platform and the Green Action Group, Green Dimension 7, which is an integral part of those universal standards. And we're working on digital finance and outcomes, etc. What are the objectives of our global industry involvement in this larger context of regulation and harmonization? We want to share the learnings of our industry. One of the fundamental observations that we can make is that the collaboration effort and this bottom-up approach are fundamental in creating language regulation, not regulation in our case, it was self-regulation, but creating standards that are implementable, actionable, and used and practical for the practitioners. And that's a vital, fundamental aspect of it, which was very important in the future of the discussions. It's building on our existing expertise, really using the experience on the ground for the definitions, for the concepts and the tools. And one of the objectives that we have in all our outreach to the current variety of initiatives of taxonomy, harmonizations, regulations, etc., is to make sure that the regulation that is coming and the definitions that are being proposed for the financial industries are applicable and make sense in the context of microfinance, which is in the context of investing in the global south, as we like to call it. Just to mention a couple of those contributions and exchanges that SPTF, together with the European Microfinance Platform and other actors, as a representative, as the sector voice, I would like to say, are currently doing. We have several projects of cooperation with OECD and in the development of a variety of standards at the OECD. We are having exchanges and discussions with the European Commission on SFDR implementation. That's together with the European Microfinance Platform, where we have been invited as a sector to provide a list of challenges and questions that come with implementation of the regulation in our industry. We have been invited to join the consultation from the European Commission via the platform on sustainable finance for the creation of a future social taxonomy. Obviously, from what we said before and what we all know, there is a lot that our industry has worked on those topics of social taxonomy. We want to make sure that this is brought into the discussion to create a future social taxonomy. We have also been invited by ISO, the industry standard organization, to join a working group by ISO, which is called TC 322, Technical Committee, working on sustainable finance standards. We're currently reaching out to IFRS and the International Sustainability Standards Board. So you already see there is a variety of major initiatives that are going on that move towards that, in that direction of creating more clarity, clear definitions, and of course, regulations that are applicable and that use those definitions. So I will stop here. That's just really as a general framing and background. I think we said that before. I just want to repeat it. We have this as a Zoom meeting. So we invite you to share any comments or questions at any time of this presentation, either in the chat box, or maybe now, if you have questions already on that first part, please don't hesitate. And if not, maybe we'll continue with Marco. So you can share what the university has been doing already and continues, and what are the future projects, some of us in cooperation and discussions with the European Microfinance Platform and with SPTF. So I pass it to Marco for your part, and I'll move to the next slide.
Yeah, thank you, Jürgen, very much for your introduction. So let me try to provide you with a broad overview of what I will be discussing today, which is very much connected to a research project that the university has launched in cooperation with SPTF, as Jürgen just recalled. The idea underlying this research project is closely connected to an observation that we made when we started analyzing the new European Union framework on sustainable finance in broad terms. And this observation is based on the fact that if you look at the main pieces of EU legislation, namely the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation and the Taxonomy Regulation, you will come across a number of references to external ESG international standards, which have been somehow embedded in the new EU framework via these references. So the idea was then to, investigate the relationship between these different sets of standards, which are now recalled by the EU framework, and the relationship between these standards and the new EU provisions. In terms of, identifying contradictions, frictions, differences, overlaps, similarities, and alignment. Also with a view to helping financial market operators, including the inclusive finance sector, to navigate this very complex new piece of legislation. Next slide, please, Jürgen. Just for you to, grasp a better understanding of what I am talking about, we can start looking at the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, where, as I mentioned already, a number of references to these international standards are made. You might be aware that the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation is an important piece of legislation because a number of new concepts have been introduced, particularly the concept of principal adverse impacts. And this new concept relates to the potential negative impacts of investment decisions made by financial market operators on sustainability factors, which of course are environmental factors, social and employee matters, and therefore, let's say, social matters, human rights, anti-corruption, anti-bribery, and so on. And in this regard, a number of disclosure obligations have been introduced both at entity and product level. What is interesting from our perspective is that a number of indicators have also been introduced in the level 2 legislation to identify whether investment decision actually provoke an adverse impact on sustainability factors. And these indicators, which are listed in set of regulatory technical standards drafted by the Joint Committee of the European Supervisory Authorities, interestingly refer to some international standards. Next slide, please. These are the indicators which I mentioned, which are included in these regulatory technical standards, which are still at the stage of a draft text. And these indicators, which of course relate to the investee companies, but also to sovereigns and real estate investments, are on one side relating to the environmental dimension, and on the other side on the social dimension. Next slide, please. With regard to the environmental dimension, what we have observed is that the new EU legislation has made a number of steps forwards, and this in turn has allowed to disconnect from references to these international standards, at least to a certain extent. This is not the case for the social dimension of sustainability, where we observe a number of references to these international standards. For example, back to what I was mentioning before, a number of indicators which will be used to, measure negative impacts on sustainability factors refer to external sets of standards, of course, in the area of ESG. Indicator number 10, again, these indicators are included in a document published in March and then reviewed a few weeks ago by the Joint Committee of the ACES. Indicator number 10 refers to the UN Global Compact principles and the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises. And indicator number 11, again, refers to the same sets of ESG standard. Next slide, please. Indicator number 10 focuses on the violations of the UN Global Compact principles and the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, which means that in order to understand whether an investment decision can have a negative impact on sustainability factors, the financial market participant will need to look at the investee company to make sure that that company has not been involved in violations of these sets of standards. And indicator number 11, similarly, next slide, please, Jürgen, indicator number 11 refers to the situation in which a company, an investee company, from the perspective of the financial market participant, has implemented mechanisms to, ascertain the compliance with the existence of mechanisms to evaluate the compliance with these sets of standards. Next slide, please. References to external standards are also included, interestingly, in the definition of sustainable investment. This is a definition which has been introduced by the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation under Article 2, which distinguishes between environmentally sustainable investments and socially sustainable investments. Where, of course, in both cases, what the investment needs to do is to provide a contribution either to an environmental objective or to a social objective. And the list of indicators to, evaluate the contribution to either the environmental objective or to the social objective are provided by the article itself. But in addition to this, in order for an investment to be qualified as sustainable, it's important that investment does not negatively, harm other objectives, both of environmental nature and of social nature. And in this regard, the financial market participants will be requested to report on the alignment, again, of investee companies with a number of different standards, moving from the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, which I already mentioned, the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, the ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Another interesting case where we have identified references to external ESG standards is the definition of environmentally sustainable economic activities under the new taxonomy regulation. Of course, this is a very complicated piece of legislation, but a number of requirements need to be met in order for an economic activity to be labeled as environmentally sustainable, starting from the very concept of substantial contribution to one of the 6 environmental objectives, which will be measured against the technical screening criteria which have been developed by the European Commission so far with regard to climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation, and next year possibly also with regard to the other environmental objectives. Then, of course, the do not significant harm principle relating to environmental objectives. But then, interestingly, in order for an economic activity to be labeled as environmentally sustainable, a number of standards in the area of social sustainability will have to be complied with. And again, we have in this regard references to international sets of ESG standards like the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, the UN guiding principle for business and human rights, and the ILO declaration. So you see that there is, there are a number of references to these standards widespread in different parts of the new EU legislation. Next slide, please, Jürgen. This table aims at, showing which are the international sets of standards which are recalled by the new EU framework, distinguishing, focusing on the contents of these standards, because some of them focus on, the 3 dimensions of sustainability, environmental, social, and governance. Others only focus on the social dimensions. Some of them include both, principles and standards concerning disclosure and operations, whilst others only focus on operations. And then in the last column, you will find the location, the recital or the article of the EU legislation where these standards have been recalled. Next slide, please. Looking at the most important and the most frequently recalled sets of standards, we tried to, focus on the main differences, similarities, to map all these strange labyrinth of, references that we have come across. And of course, as I already mentioned, if we look, for example, at the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, they, cover the 3 dimensions of sustainability. Of course, they target multinational enterprises, and this is not surprising, I think. They provide standards and principles concerning to both operations and disclosure obligations. In relation to, the environmental dimension, what they request is for multinational enterprises to establish internal systems aiming at collecting information and assess their performances, in terms of environmental protection, if you want. Similarly, the second set of standards, the UN Guiding Principle for Business and Human Rights, of course, they will focus on human rights or on the social dimension of sustainability. They target both states and businesses, and they provide high-level principles concerning, internal systems to, come up with an enhanced level of protection in terms of human rights and in terms of detecting potential violations of human rights. Next slide, so that I can, provide some concluding remarks. What have we, identified so far? That, as I mentioned already, with regard to the environmental dimension, it seems that the EU legislation has made a significant number of steps forwards, which probably will place, actually are already placing the EU legislation ahead in terms of contents, in terms of stringent provisions. The EU legislation vis-a-vis these international standards, which of course are high-level principles in many cases. In practical terms, this means that for financial market participants which want to, make available financial products which are environmentally sustainable, they will need to make a step forward as compared to the situation which was in place before the adoption of all these new pieces of legislation, which means that financial products which will be labeled as environmentally sustainable will need to, align to performance indicators which are more demanding than the international standards. This is not the case in terms of social sustainability, and the reason for that is because we don't have yet in place at European level a social taxonomy reflecting the structure of the environmental taxonomy based on the very definition of substantial contribution to social objectives. We are not there yet. We might get there at some point. If we get there, then the ESG standards, which are currently used also to measure social performances, might lose a part of their importance, because probably in a similar vein, financial products making social investments will be required to, comply with the standards and requirements, which will be at that point set in the legislation, which might be slightly more demanding than the high-level principles and the high-level standards which are embedded in those standards which I have recalled. And in this regard, I'm thinking about, the creation of technical screening criteria also in the area of social sustainability in a similar vein as to what we have in place now at environmental level with the technical screening criteria, which have been developed by the European Commission, implementing the taxonomy regulation. So I will stop here, and then if there are questions, happy to discuss. Thank you, Jürgen.
Thank you, Marco. I'm sure that there are some questions. Don't be shy. This is a complex topic. Any observations or questions in the group on these points that Marco was raising? And I must say it's fantastic to have this cooperation with university and as a sector also have the opportunity to work with the university on those topics. Any questions or even observations, thoughts on your side on these developments? And if not, we'll continue. I mean, I think it will be interesting, and I'm thanks, Marco and Roberto, of course, who's in the background. I mean, this is a great team at university that we have a lot of exchanges with. And I'm very happy that we also have Ariane in this panel, because what was important for us is to say, okay, all of this work, how does this really translate, I would say on the ground with practitioners as an investor, practically, how do you find your way around in this, in this environment of references and requirements and internal capacities and requirements as well. And I know that Invest in Visions has done a really fantastic job, also in cooperation, in a great cooperation project with CERISE, who is also on this call. So Ariane, thank you for joining that panel and for giving us a bit of your practical experiences and observations in this process.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much, Jürgen. I just saw now that in the chat, Lucia, you had says a question. Hello, Jürgen. May I unmute myself and make a comment? So shall we take that beforehand, or?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Lucia, just in the same moment that you handed over to me.
It's a group. It's a discussion group. So
so go for it.
Go ahead, Lucia.
Thanks, Ariane. Hello, Jürgen, Marco. Pleasure to meet you. This is Lucia from MFR. Congrats for this excellent work, and I can only welcome and congratulate SPTF for the work in making sure that the voice of inclusive finance is heard. For sure, well, this regulation has the clear feature of being mandatory, so we have no choice in a way, but we can take this in a positive and constructive way. And it will for sure be very important for all the players along the value chain, that not only we learn on how to better measure and report some of the risks that are common to many industries, but that we also don't what is essential of our industry. In a way, using a metaphor, if you looked at an ambulance that is saving lives in a war zone, and you focused on whether the vehicle is electric and whether it is minimizing its emissions, you would lose a bit of a focus, right? So let's try not to do that with your valuable help.
Yes, very well understood. Mm-hmm. And I'd also take that opportunity to say, it's to thank you, Lucia, and of course MFR particularly. I mean, you have and you continue to be a very important participant in these discussions. One of the big fundamental challenges with this entire regulation implementation is, of course, data and data sourcing. It's reporting requirements. As you know, we have a very active working group within the Social Investor Working Group of SPTF, that's trying to, to work together on those topics. And the contribution and the exchange and the commitment of MFR for a long time to, play an important role in that data generation, capacity management, etc., is really very important. So thanks for that. Ariane, maybe?
Yeah, now I'll take over. Yeah, so just shortly, I wanted to present investment vision so that you know what whom we are talking about, or what activities are we talking about. So investment vision is now 15 years old. We have we are specifically active in the field of microfinance. So we have different microfinance funds. The assets under management are currently over 900 million of euros, and yeah, we have a team of 25 employees and are active across all regions worldwide, except of Central Europe, let's say. So yeah, outside of Europe. And through the microfinance fund, we have different ways of calculating impact, or at least the outreach. So we have reached over 600,000 people in the middle of the year, let's say. Maybe you can go to this next slide, Jürgen. I wanted to go a bit really into into concretely how does our investment process work at Investment Vision. So what we do is that we provide loans to microfinance institutions. We have over 80 microfinance institutions worldwide as partner institutions, and actually in our investment process we have different steps, so which you see on the left side. I will not go really into detail, but just for you to understand where then the regulation applies, or where the regulation is relevant. So first is on-site due diligence. I mean, now with COVID it's not really on-site, but usually it's on-site. Which is done mainly through our advisors, where we consider ESG and impact factors, to try to integrate them as much as possible into the analysis, so to prepare. Then we have the AC decision, which is then based on the input that the advisors provide us, and which is taken inside of Investment Visions in the investment committee, where we also integrate ESG risks and opportunities. And then we have this whole post-investment phase, let's say, or I mean, the investment is still undergoing, but it's the investment has been done. And there we have different approaches to where we still need to, or not approaches, but we have different aspects which we need to monitor. So one of them is also ESG indicators and ESG risk, and then also the impact and the outreach that we have. So one example was the number of people we reached through our microfinance institution. So this is just for you to understand, and so to see, okay, where do different aspects of the regulation that Marco already illustrated apply. So we have to take into account ESG risks and potential impact that we achieve into our investment decisions, which is quite challenging sometimes, which you will see on the next slide, Jürgen. I wanted to just raise some thoughts that I had and some challenges that we face. So we said, Jürgen, you have already mentioned it. Yeah, so there's a lack actually of data providers or rating scoring reports where we can have standardized reported data on which we can rely. So sometimes when you talk to other funds, then they say, we rely on MSCI, ISS, ESG, all those data banks, which we don't have, or where microfinance institutions are not represented. So that makes it more difficult. Then, data situation I already mentioned. So we have to rely on data that our advisors provide us, or that we receive through other corporations, such as with CERISE or with other actors, through the Linus data bank. And things like that. Then we have the challenge that we don't provide equity or direct investments into companies, but that we are a debt fund, so we provide loans, which makes it also, which is just one challenge in the context of the regulation, because of, for example, we cannot do any engagement policies for or engagement approaches, let's say, because we are not investing directly into the companies. Then, which is also a challenge in my regard, is that the taxonomy and all the approaches are based on, or focused on European companies. So we have the challenge that we are active outside of Europe, which can just be different. So maybe we need a tailored approach to that. And then one of the main challenges, actually, I put it at the end, but it's that there's no social taxonomy yet. So we have the green taxonomy, which tells us, okay, what is a sustainable activity? But there's no social taxonomy, which gives us a certain way of guidance. How microfinance, I mean, it's rather clear that if there's a social taxonomy, microfinance and financial inclusion would be included there, but we don't have any guidance yet regarding benchmarks or things like that, how this financial inclusion activity should look like to be a sustainable activity. So that's also a challenge I see in the regard. So our current approach and solution, let's say, I mean, it's just one point mentioned here. Certainly it's more complex, but what we try to do at the moment is really to coordinate and harmonize with other actors in the field. So through the SPTF, through CERISE, to see, okay, what are their approaches, and then also to, for example, in the context of reporting requirements, to not overburden the microfinance institutions. So if different investors have same approaches, then it's also easier for reporting for microfinance institutions, and also better for the reporting per se, let's say. So that's our approach at the moment. Time is running, so I think I will just stop here. So maybe there are some comments to my presentation, or now to both presentations, to the combination of both. Yeah, thank you very much. Cecile has a question based on Lucia's comment.
Yes,
is there margin of negotiation?
And I'm just
maybe
reading
it's
out
an
in case
open question.
Yeah.
just raise it, maybe directly, yeah.
Yeah, it's based on Lucia's comment and Ariane, when you say the applicability of the standards, and we have this discussion with the Social Investor Working Group at the SPTF level on the applicability of those standards and how to make sure it makes sense for the financial service provider, that it's really helping them in risk management and decision making. And my question maybe to the university also is, do we have any margin for negotiation or advocacy or proposal to the European Commission to also propose a specific reporting framework that would be applicable for the South and that would make sense for the South? We can test this year with the next deadline for reporting in June 2022. But yeah, do we see any margin, any role for SPTF and the European Microfinance Platform, backed by the work of the university and by the feedback from the investors and the Social Investor Working Group from SPTF, to make something actionable and meaningful in terms both of reporting and decision making for the investors and the financial service provider? That's an open question. That's
And Marco, I don't know if you want to comment anything on that. I mean, I'll add it after, but
just a simple remark. I think that you are better placed to know whether there is any margin for your sector to make the European Commission, but probably I would say more generally the EU institutions, more, let's say, aware of the peculiarities of your sector, which of course will face a number of practical issues in relation to reporting with regard to the investments made in regions where you don't have legal requirements as detailed as the ones that we now have in the European Union. So I'm not in the best position to answer this question. What I can say is that, again, in the context of this cooperation with SPTF, we managed to organize event The university will organize it with the Luxembourg Sustainable Finance Initiative and again SPTF on November 29th, where one of the speakers will be one of the component of the European platform advising the European Commission with specific regards to the social taxonomy. The idea was, to facilitate a dialogue and exchange of views. If this, this experiment will lead somewhere, probably it's too early to say, but for sure there is, at least the willingness to make everyone aware of the, specificities and peculiarities of every recipient of the new disclosure rules, because I think that the basic assumption is that one size fits all measures and obligations and provisions, and this is a very broad legal consideration, usually are not adequate, and probably some more thinking on even potentially your sector might be needed.
Yeah, and I can only add to that. I had the same thing I wanted to react. It's one of the many attempts that we are trying to do. I think we have realized that we need to be active at that level, because this regulation is going to come anyway, and it will concern us, but not only in a reactive way, but also in an active way. I think we can be, and we are, I would say, let's say we are proud of 20 years of work in this sector about what is social performance. And we managed so far, at least, to get some initial contacts that we need to strengthen. I think the cooperation we have with the University of Luxembourg, this panel that we have with the Luxembourg Sustainable Finance Initiative, I think also the discussions we are having regularly with the ministries here in Luxembourg, all of these are little elements that we will bring to the table to hopefully get our sector experience, voice heard, as I said in the introduction, at those levels. So yeah, we are working on that. I think we're stronger together again. That's the thing that I said in the very beginning.
I see that there was also a question directly directed to me. I don't know, time is over now, I think, officially.
2 minutes, so
but maybe, okay. So here's a question. Is the microfinance fund classified as Article 9 or 8? And how will we comply with the reporting requirements? So yeah, first of all, the microfinance fund is classified as Article 9, since it has in its main goal, its main goal of the investment is a sustainable activity. So that's why we decided that we don't have any, we cannot say we are an Article 8, because we have we have a sustainable investment really as goal of our investment. So we are an Article 9 fund, or have been classified also by our management company. And for the reporting requirements, we are now working together with our advisors and to see how they can take up the data or receive the data from the microfinance institutions. We're also seeing how we can develop maybe proxies for some of the indicators. So with regard to CO2 emissions, for example, we are working together with CERISE, and Cecile is also here, so to see how we can receive that data, what are indicators that are feasible and that we can receive from our microfinance institutions. So we take different approaches to it. And for example, just one with regard to the PAI indicators. So we are developing with other investors together an Excel template where the indicators are integrated, and that then all the different investors can send out to the microfinance institutions, so that we have the same approach to it. Yeah, so that's maybe a concrete example for you. But happy to discuss afterwards also if you want. You can contact me, and then that's maybe just as a short input.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe, and I think we have to come to a close. What I want to say, it can be sometimes discouraging, to see all of this work and all these this variety and mass of initiatives, and it's discouraging at our practitioner level. I also find it sometimes discouraging to see that even between the huge worldwide standard setting initiatives, between the GRI and IFRS and but somehow I can't help thinking that we're a little bit like the Charles Lindberghs in 1920 trying to make the first planes fly, and they fall down after 50 meters. And I think maybe we're still there for the time being. But that's fine, because those experiments are going to lead us, to where aviation has gone. And if it's in 2 or 5 or maybe 5 years, I don't think it's going to be longer. But I think we will be in a world where reporting requirements will cover financial, social, and environmental performance. And to a certain extent, that's what we always wanted in our sector. So let's take it positive, get our act together, work together, be strong as a sector to bring that experience that we have created over 20 years into these debates. So with that, I just invite you join, let's work together. We will do, and we are at your, we are available for you inputs, feedbacks, observations to make our sector visible, strong, united, showing that we are globally implementing work. A lot is already here. And let's hope that we can contribute, to making those planes fly ever longer and ever safer. With that, thank you, Marco. Thank you, Ariane.
Thank you to you all. Yeah.
To join the session. I wish you a great end of this meeting. And I'm sitting here in Luxembourg, just in front of the Abbaye de Luxembourg. And I can tell you, I miss you more than you probably do. So I hope next year you're all here with me.
Yeah. All the best to
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
All e-MFP for the support.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.